let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Stand up, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Coming to find out about the truth of J6. We have J6ers here. There are 4 J6ers who died that day, who will never be able to speak again or advocate for J6. And their names are Ashley Babbitt, Roseanne Boylan, Kevin Greason, and Benjamin Phillips. Those 4 were Trump supporters killed that day. There's also Matthew Perna, who represents all the J6ers who killed themselves because they couldn't withstand the persecution the government hammered on them. So let's just have a moment of silence for those 5, and then we'll hand it over and do an invocation. JoAnn. Is JoAnn not a fireball? Is she not a firebrand? Right? So I want to talk about a couple things. One, this is a J6er town hall. This is open to the public. This is open to liberals and Democrats. If somebody wants to come up and talk about anything with their perception of what they believe happened that day, we open discussion as long as there's no disturbance and it can be done in a kind, respectful, tactful manner, right? This is the first time anything like this has been done anywhere in the United States. Usually it's not open to the public. That side doesn't want to show up or be nice. So the goal of this venue is to bring forth the CNN narrative of what happened that day, and to have people who were there talk about it and talk about what happened to us and what really happened. So that, yeah.
We have a car that needs to leave that's blocked in. There's a red Tesla and a black Subaru in the straight part of the driveway blocking.
Okay. Do we get that? Red Subaru, black Tesla?
No,
red Tesla, black Subaru. Okay.
Hey Paul, I'm in front of the garage. Is that going to be a problem?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm the white.
No, that side.
Okay.
Okay.
It's your side.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously parking was a little bit of a problem, so thank you for suffering through that. Thank you for being here. So the J6 town hall format, this round robin town hall, the questions we want to answer are the questions that you have. Okay? We're going to let you lead the discussion. We have a program and questions that we would bring out talking about election integrity. The underlying cause of J6 was that I went there, they went there, all 5 of us went there because we believed the 2020 election had major irregularity. I'll say stolen, but we can dumb it down to irregularity. That's the underlying cause. Then the true nature of me and why I'm doing this. So I went there that day. It was the first political event of any sort I ever attended. I had never gone to a political rally of any sort. I never knocked on a door. I never helped any candidate do anything. But I lived through the biomedical police state of COVID. And it woke me up to something was not right. Then I watched Seattle burn. And we have to think about this because this is all part of this process. And by the way, we're still dealing with it. The truth is still not out. Then I became activated and became a Trump supporter, although I voted for him before, but I became a vocal Trump supporter, but I thought to myself, I want to be the silent majority. Because heaven forbid I do it publicly, right? There was a 50-year-old man afraid to say that I supported Trump. Why? I would lose all my liberal business from it. My father's liberal would hate me. I would be attacked on social media. So I just did my silent majority. He lost under suspicious fashion. And I got activated. And quickly, I went to J6. And by the way, prior to October of 2020, that day, I was a political atheist. I couldn't have defined Republican, Democrat, liberal, any of that. Didn't care, just wanted to live my life. Does anybody know what happened on October 20th, 2020? Hunter Biden's laptop broke by a Miranda Devine article. Okay? And through this process, it made me realize that the media is lying to us. So I went through this process, and now here I am. I'm the first Washington State resident ever to be sentenced to prison for picketing. My father's stepson reported me to the FBI. I lost my business. My wife divorced me. I've lost everything. But I have God's grace, so I'm good. God works in mysterious ways. I believe that He has put all of us on a path, and God works through other people. And these people are put into my life for a reason. There may be somebody here that is being drawn here for something that I don't know. So as we gather this, it's to bring the truth out, but there's another component that's even more important. And we have JoAnn and Jerrod, who were there that day, did not get arrested. They are a J6 attendee. They came back. And there's 800 times more of this champion than there are of this champions. So it's important when we look to recruiting those people in our conservative organizations, if we can find the cohort of the attendee who's been afraid to raise their hands, we will find a bucket of volunteers that, as opposed to the normal PCO, 80% might be duds. And by the way, I was state committee man of my county last term, so I went through this space. But if you can find that attendee, 80% of the time they're good, and 2 of those people will be champions and will run for office. And will show up to every meeting and do all the work, knock on all the doors, show up at everything, and we have many of those people right here. But if we can find them, we'll have more. And usually when I speak is when they raise their hand and say they went. So we're able to find them. So that's who I am. We'll introduce the others, but I'm going to introduce Glenn Morgan. So Glenn Morgan is part of my J6 story. The FBI knocked on my door. I was activated. I'm like, let's go. I was so new and naive to politics, I didn't know that I could just go to the 25th and knock on doors and make phone calls and wave banners, and the spiritual battle that called us to DC the same way. The battle of good versus evil that got us up out of our chairs and flew across country to do work. That same spiritual battle can be solved by the simple work we can do today and pick up the phone and knock on doors and get initiative signed. So somehow I got in touch with Glenn. Somebody said, hey, I was at a protest, I met this guy. Looked him up, called him, talked to him. Met him with this other organizer friend at a casino in Tenino. And we just had coffee. Then I had him lead a group of 5 people getting organized at a house in Furcrest, Washington. Then the FBI knocked on my door, talked to my wife, and called me before I was arrested. And I was like, I need an attorney, and I don't want a liberal attorney. And I called Glenn, who referred me to my attorney, Angus Lee, out of Vancouver, Washington. If you don't know that name, he's a retired Navy SEAL fighting patriot, and led me down that direction. Since then, obviously, it used to be people think, well, to go to J6, you got to be a MAGA, diehard, crazy Republican. I had never done anything. That wasn't me. I wasn't like Dana, my film guy, who does everything. So, I am that person now. I've been radicalized. I believe communism is here under the familiar name of the Democratic Party. It might be disguised as democratic socialist, but I have been persecuted to the point, like I said, where I've lost everything. Now, I'm leading this group for a reason. These 2 guys have families. I don't. Lost it. I went from living on the house on the lake to living in my basement renting out rooms, because if I get pinched again, and by the way, we have a government in our state that has put together how do we describe it? It is the Domestic Terrorism Violent Extremism Task Force, led by BLM activists. We also have an attorney general who can perform a warrantless search based on any referral. My attorney has said, just by having this organization of past domestic terrorists, I'm committing conspiracy stick them in. But guess what? I have nothing left to lose and everything left to gain. And Glenn has helped me do that. So without further ado, Glenn.
They just discovered 800,000 non-good ballots in Oregon.
Voters. Yeah,
Yes.
non.
Voters, sorry,
Yeah.
I spaced. But 800,000. And our state is refusing to turn over the voter rolls. So when we get to here, we're not done with this. We're just starting. That was my impetus. And plus Trump said, come. So I went.
Election integrity is and was the underlying cause of January 6th. It was the foundation of why we went. You heard a little bit of my story, like I was a political atheist, like I didn't care. I never followed a voting poll. I never followed anything like that until I got to this point and thought that I'd be a silent majority and I'd let my vote speak for itself until my vote was disenfranchised. I've talked to Brandy Cruz, who believes that that election was safe and fair. But I got her to change her mind by just saying this. Never mind voting machines. There was election law that was changed by governors, Supreme Court, even county auditors. Election law was changed because of COVID. And the Constitution provides the only way election law can be changed is by state legislature. Right? These are things that I knew. And I was like, unequivocal. And I was like, well, do you believe that happened? She's like, well, yes, I do. And then remember the defining moment of my, and I'll say red pilling, was Hunter Biden's laptop for me and the cover up. And what I saw in the media that was Hunter Biden's laptop is 51 CIA agents at the time said it was Russian misinformation, right? And then I watched Tucker Carlson and they had Tony Bublisky talk about the back end of everything. And I'm like, somebody's lying here. Because neither of these things could be true at the same time. So the cover-up of Hunter Biden's laptop supposedly prevented about 15% of people voting for Trump, that cover-up. So did you think that happened? I asked Brandy. She's like, yes, I did. And I said, do you believe that the Twitter files that came out where Matt Taibbi released documentation that showed the government was censoring conservatives and shadow banning statements of good things against Trump? And she said, yes, I do. I go, don't you think that indicates election integrity problem? She's like, well, maybe I need to reconsider what my definition of election integrity is. I didn't talk about Dominion. I didn't talk about dead voters. I just talked about these things that I really knew of. As we know, is that there are more votes for Biden than there ever was for any Democrat president ever. More than Kamala. I mean, the votes were like 10 million more than what Kamala. Well, there's all these things, and there are just a few. If you remember that, there are just a few key components in states and counties that could be breached. Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, those 5 swing states, to push a small amount of changes. And so all of those things led me to open my eyes to then go, oh my gosh, America and voting is not what I thought. I need to do something. I didn't know what else to do. It was the only platform open to me, the only journey, the only thing I saw. I didn't know you guys, right? I was stuck on my computer. And I'm like, we need to take action in person and do these things. And so I went. And, I'm lucky. I didn't end up in prison for years. I had 30 days for picketing, right? But we went through that same process. So anyway, that's my election integrity scenario that got me there.
I probably. What was that second part of it?
Like, what did you observe?
Oh, what did you observe when you were inside?
Yeah.
So, yep.
So my story was, and ironically, I entered. Test. So I entered the Capitol 23 seconds behind Ashley Babbitt from the same exact entrance. She went left and I went right. That moment, when I saw it on closed caption TV, made me realize that God works in mysterious ways, and that could have been me. Right? It was that simple. Where I entered the Upper West Terrace Senate Wing entrance. There was no violence. I saw no damage. There were no signs. There was no restrictions. There was no recording saying not to go in. There were 5 police officers letting us in, and I walked in an orderly fashion on a handicap ramp that people were walking in and out of. I was there at 2:23 in the afternoon, at 2:23 and 50 seconds. Actually, Babbitt was 2:23:23. And I know this because it's very, very important. So I was in the Capitol for 23 minutes, and I took a right, and I walked into the crypt. I actually looked into an office space and did not cross the threshold. And there were people in there with like their feet up and some of that stuff you might have seen. And I was like, I don't think that's right. And then I also asked myself, what am I here for, right? And I realized I was there to protest the stolen election, and I was just following this crowd, and there was no idea when we left watching Trump, we didn't go, well, we're all going to storm the Capitol now. No, we're just like, hey, I guess we're just going to take this walk and do this thing. I'm the kind of person, if it's like a general admission concert, I have my head in the speaker. I'm right down front. If there's a Seahawks championship parade, I bring my kids, and we go right down front, and we'll get stepped on by crowd control horses. The experience is part of the life that gives me. So that's why I went in. And I got to the crypt. I walked into the crypt, which is the smaller round part, not the big one, which is the rotunda. And I raised my hand and I chanted, "Stop the Steal," which we've been chanting, "Stop the Steal, USA," 4 more years, all day long. Our house. And I did that at the top of my voice and realized that that's what I was there. I was done. It was 23 minutes. Then I made my way out. I walked out through tear gas. I actually saw a hallway filled with tear gas, and I walked into that tear gas on purpose because I was lost and kind of didn't know how to get back out. Like I kind of got turned around or something, and I'm like, well, I'm going to see if the wives' tale of putting your T-shirt up over your nose will work with tear gas, and it did. And then I was escorted out a broken window by a police officer after 23 minutes. And that was my experience. There was no damage, but I just chanted "Stop the Steal" at the top of my voice and received a 30-day prison sentence, first Washington State resident. There have been thousands of people charged with the same misdemeanors, which was disorderly conduct, remaining in a restricted space, disorderly conduct in a restricted space, picketing and parading, and remaining and staying. 2 disorderly conducts. The only one that holds weight is the picketing, and it was black and white in my case. My attorney said I wore a "Count All Legal Votes" T-shirt, had a political statement on my shirt, and I expressed it verbally. That's the definition of picketing. There was no way I was getting out of that. Then thousands of people. And by the way, the illegal picketing is a Class B petty offense misdemeanor with the same sentencing guidelines as walking your dog off leash on a federal park. Thousands of people have been charged and got $50 tickets before me, hundreds after, right? But we were persecuted and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law so that so you would see it, and none of you would stand up and raise your fist someday and go, "Stop the steal."
I didn't see it when we were going in, but later on in the day, there was tear gas out. You could smell it, feel it. And again, walked in and out of doors, there were guards. I did see later on people were hanging out outside. I saw some cracked glass on one of the main doors. So, I knew it wasn't all like perfect, perfectly nonviolent. I knew there was, some stuff that had happened because I saw some broken glass. So,
I'll just close with, if there had been any police officer anywhere near me that said "Don't go in," of any sort, or any restricted area, no trespassing, I wouldn't have gone in. Now, I told my judge that, and when I told my judge that, he said, "Well, you're close to violating your plea right now," because part of my plea was that I entered a restricted area to picket. But had somebody said "Don't go in," I wouldn't have gone in. I'm a law-abiding conservative, right? But this is what was happening, and through the whole process, there's a mob psychology that happens, right? And I'll just, well,
happening here or not. And the conversation was actually pretty discouraging because the people who were trying to make ballot harvesting happen said that they're dealing with constituents who don't want to break rules, not knowing that Washington's rules allow for the things that they were being told to do. And that it's just that it feels like cheating because I mean, the Democrats have set it up in a way that it actually is cheating, but it's not breaking the rules. So I would like you to amplify that it is about collecting ballots, and for us who know that that's really what's needed, to don't give a damn about the rules or the integrity of it, because they have made it possible for us to do that and to go ahead and do the ballot harvesting.
Well, I mean, I don't want.
I had the chance of meeting Matt Brown, who is also working with the Washington State Republican Party. He was the chair of Yakima County GOP and spent inroads on ballot harvesting and vote and ballot printing, even from his car at the doorstep of a voter. So we talked about this, and I also had conversations with Matt Froelich. And what is in Washington State, we are in the Wild West of ballot harvesting and can do anything. You can vote multiple times. Your second vote will count. Your first vote doesn't. You can print up multiple ballots for yourself. And so in order to compete, we have to ballot harvest. And Matt has a proven track record of what he did in Yakima to flip districts and to find the right districts to flip. But this is a little bit off topic from J6, but I know that you want to.
Back to Nancy Pelosi basically declining to have the National Guard out there, which I think is a question you meant.
The answer is it depends on what they bring out with this grand conspiracy case, because the grand conspiracy case that has a grand jury in Florida is looking all the way back to the Charlottesville rally, all the way through the 2024 election. And Nancy Pelosi has her hands all over Russiagate, Ukrainegate, and January 6th. So it depends on the results of that. Other than that, you know, she's an old lady, and she's probably got not very many more terms left in her. But yeah, directly nothing other than that grand conspiracy case.
Next question.
Here, I'll comment a little bit on that. So one of the reasons that the J6 town hall should exist is so that we could even have a Democrat step up to the mic and say, Trump never requested 10,000 National Guard troops to help in the defense of the Capitol. Okay? That is a talking point and misinformation point that puts Nancy Pelosi refusing his help by way of optics as the true narrative of what happened. So it was put forth that the president says, yes, you can do this, but then whoever gets the request has to accept the request. There is documentation with the 10,000 troops to be requested. That was then turned down by Nancy by way of the D.C. Police Chief, Stephen Sund, which there's more information that just came out, trending topic on J6, that the D.C. Police Chief, that the riot was allowed to happen to facilitate the firing of Stephen Sund, the current D.C. Police Chief. Text messages were just released that whistleblowers came out to talk about that. But that is one of the controversial, right, misinformation questions that are on topic. Did Trump release or authorize 10,000 National Guard troops to help with the millions of protesters? Because the reality is true. The police officers that were there were set up. They were understaffed. They didn't have help. They didn't know what was going to happen, even though there was intel through all the agencies that this was a big thing.
In Seattle, where 95% of people believe the mainstream narrative, they've been shown that
Oh, yeah.
I live in Seattle, where 95% of the people, the voters, my neighbors, believe the mainstream narrative. You know, they've been told what to believe about it. They've been shown images of people jumping on tables and even, you know, defecating, whatever the negative side of it was. What's the one thing you would say is, you know, the one thing I could point out that would break the narrative, you know, in your opinion? What one fact kind of would throw a wrench in their story?
I'll start with that one. Testing? Okay. So my experience and conversations with thousands of radical corporate media believing Democrats that there's not a chance in hell they would ever change their mind, is this. There is about 33, last numbers are like 34% of the country believes or has trust in corporate media. It's a real statistic. 34% of the country still believes CNN is honest journalism. By the way, prior to October of 2020, I believe that too, right? So I was in that space. Of those 33%, about, at least my experience is about half of those fall in line with, I will say, hardcore, progressive, crazy, gender-leading ideology that's dangerous, and they will kill us, literally. There's no one the left hates more than Charlie Kirk or Trump than J6s. We have security here. So that some people you just cannot change, okay? If I were to give one, the only thing that I can, from a first-hand basis, when people say, and I've been told, I've received thousands of death threats, thousands, that I should be hung up on a short branch with a long rope, or a short rope and a long, or should still be in prison for illegal picketing for the rest of my life, that we're all traitors. And they go, look at this. And I'll say, that's not me, okay? We were grouped with people who may have caused real harm, that was not us. Those people causing major problems, we know that there was infiltration. There was no counter-protest to J6. The counter-protest that normally happens on any conservative anything happened within J6 itself. So that, the nature of those, by the way, there's about 50 Antifa that were arrested, known Antifa, arrested and pardoned, that were there to cause problems, right? There were also many conservative men there that were upset and pissed off with the government. Heck, I'm pissed off with the government right now, right? But in that space of anger and mob psychology, those type of people will do whatever they think is necessary to get a thought process on the subject and get things heard, or just to cause problems themselves. So that's what I would tell you, is that the nature of all of that, the one thing is, it can't be, the whole process can't be put onto one person's feet that they are the criminal.
Another question right here, Paul.
I have maybe an irrelevant question, but I'm just curious if any of you think it ties in with any of this. And it's called redistricting. And we've seen it front and center this year, and my prediction is it's going to get worse. 2028, we may have a congressman sitting right here, and they draw the lines just like the American flag from Spokane to Bellevue, and they create 10 districts that are Democratic. So I don't think we've seen anything yet. Does the redistricting, which is a powerful thing, have anything to do with all this?
So I can tie in January 6th and the redistricting exactly, and how it absolutely pertains to us. and that's the redistricting that's happening even in other states than Washington. And that is, remember, I'm kind of new to politics, right? And a lot of my bandwidth is just by what I've been through, focuses on J6 related things, right? That's what sticks in my brain. That's what I learned. But I also worked my way through our county politics. It became state committee man in my county, which I'm not very active there right now for a reason. And we're in the same county, right? But the reason is my organization and volunteering time that I'm taking is doing this, is putting things like this together. I'm uniquely qualified to get J6ers and those that were in attendance to a spot. To them, they might raise their hand, say, I went, so you can recruit them, because they will be champions and run for office and wave every banner and do all of that. The redistricting question pertains to us across the country. I wasn't really aware of what gerrymandering was or any of that, but I've seen what's going on, right? I certainly believe that there shouldn't be, black districts. Neither does the Supreme Court. And I'm like, okay. So the reality is this for us. If this country is ruled by Democrats again, President, Congress, Senate, there's a strong likelihood we're going to get round up again. But they're going to come after us again. We talk about it all the time. What's the next shoe that's going to drop? Don't think that they wouldn't do that, double jeopardy or anything like that, right? The Democrat doesn't care. They don't care about what the Constitution says or does. They care about power, right? So the redistricting that now we are catching up with the gerrymandering that's happening in other Democrat states, that all the leaders in the Democrat Party are upset about, means that we will have some additional congressmen that are Republicans. So that's how, hopefully, that will stop us from being picked up in the next 4 years, like the next term. We worry about that.
We can just make it 10, we'll be fine.
Right, literally, we seriously worry about that, right? So that's how we look from a J6 perspective. That's what we're looking at.
There's another question right here. Yes.
Well, to ask about that, you have a pardon, right? So,
right? In my case, a pardon and $7 gets me a coffee. It means absolutely nothing, right? I still have the charge on my record. For somebody like Taylor, and I know his wife, it means everything, because it got him out of prison. Okay? So that doesn't matter. They will find a way to reverse the pardon.
I said, dude, you were the one next to Ray Epps. What did he say in your ear? He goes, I don't remember. He's like, he really didn't remember. It was just, he said something and it didn't stick. And I said, well, are you guys going to you're going to go to trial? Or are you going to pull him up as a witness to figure out what it was that he said? Oh no, my attorney said we're not allowed to subpoena him. The court has said he's off limits. And he didn't even know his name. I informed him of his name. I said, that was Ray Epps. Oh, I wondered who that guy was. He had no idea. He'd been in 2.5 years at that point. Had no idea who Ray Epps was. So Ray Epps, yes, absolutely. Figure out who Ray Epps is. And what you're probably going to unwind with Ray Epps is not Antifa. You're going to find establishment Republicans that were part of that. Ray Epps is not tied to Antifa. He's tied to Republicans and a Republican counter-op that was going on there. J6 is full of ops. It wasn't just Antifa. It wasn't just Pelosi. There were people on the right as well trying to cause chaos. And Ray Epps is tied in with the pipe bomber. That was extremely tight, the timing on that. For when the pipe bomber was discovered, and then 2 minutes later, they did what they did, and it was just absolute precision.
And I'm happy to talk to you. But we should be very excited to be alive today. And my favorite book of the Bible, I have some hats in there. It says on the right side of the hat, favorite book of the Bible is the book of James, which can be summarized in 3 words: pray and act.
Another question over here.
I wanted to respond to that.
Okay.
One of the things is 35 Americans were arrested that lived in Washington State for J6s. Was 35. I've spoken to most of them. There's 16 of us that are kind of in our crew that are, on a text thread. We meet semi-regularly. We're meeting more regularly, but semi-regularly. there's a long process for somebody who's been through what we've done that gets them to through a grieving process and through the trauma and destruction, to have the courage to do anything and sit up and talk versus burying their head in the sand or running away, right? So we have, and it takes time. There's a huge grieving process, like the nature of grief, right? Denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance, right? And so we have, he's a little bit different, but just because he's just a little bit different. He has a podcast, and he's like very dialed in and that sort of thing. But we have other strong, courageous men who just shut the door on this and never want to talk about it again. Right? And I'm just going to start the closing process because we're getting towards the end of this event. I'm going to cover some of the questions that weren't asked, and I'm just going to run through these really quickly. So these are questions that come up all the time. One, we didn't talk about Ashley Babbitt too much, right? But there are many who, Ashley Babbitt was shot in the neck by Officer Michael Bird through a window with police officers behind her. And most of the left will talk about that, she F-A-F-O. He was doing his job, right? And we could talk about her at length. No police officers died on January 6th, not one. News reports will cite it, politicians will cite it, not a single officer died on January 6th. And then Brian Sicknick is an officer who the Washington Post reported was beaten to death with a fire extinguisher that day. That was a complete made-up fabrication, who died later. The double standard of had a stroke and died from lack of, but he died from lack of treatment. We could have had a whole conversation about the double standard of justice. No conservative can receive a fair trial in Washington, D.C. because the jury is 92.5% Democrat, and every one of us would have been on trial with a judge who is a victim themselves. Those judges are the same judges that have stopped Trump every step of the way. Jeb Boasberg, Beryl Howell, all of them. That lawfare is the same fight that we went through. It is the same exact fight. 140 officers claimed injury. The majority of those officers sprayed pepper spray and got pepper spray sprayed back into their faces. There's a big lie and a report that feces was smeared on the walls of Washington, D.C. Washington Post reported this, and it came from an aide of Adam Schiff. There's a complete lie. If there was any feces or urine ever in D.C. during January 6th, we would all have 1,000 photos of that plastered across all of our news feeds. So I just wanted to talk. There's more and more to talk about this, but my personal closing, and I'm going to close with this. The amount of community and familial destruction this has caused. I don't know, has anybody ever had a problem with a family member or a friend due to your political beliefs? Okay, right. Remember my story, and I'm going to defend my ex in that I'm not the man she married. I'm not that same guy, right? The nature of, I have two liberal fathers, born and raised in Washington. It's a long story, I have two. They won't talk to me. I have a best friend I lost. Part of my wife's story, and part of other J6ers, I'm not the only J6er who lost their marriage, is that when this happened, she was supportive in the beginning, and then guess what happened? And she didn't realize it. Her brother said, I'm not going to have anything to deal with you because of your husband. Then her best friend said, I'm not going to have anything to deal with you. The best friend where we've been in each other's, watched our, helped our kids get delivered. Two of them. Not going to have anything to do with you because of your husband. Then financial devastation rolled through, right? So that community and familial devastation is what has torn through this, right? And then lastly, we talked about it, and I'll close with what Taylor talked about. We need to get active locally. I know most of us here are. I have a book that's being published, Dad Defending Democracy, and you can go to daddefendingdemocracy.com and pre-order it.